Okay, good afternoon. We're ready to start our Julia Dent Grant Bicentennial commemoration. If you'll please stand, the color guard, led by Commander George Weinman, will present the colors.
Left face.
Now I will ask Michelle Strauss to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Order. Heavy.
Well, thank you very much. On behalf of the Grant Monument Association, I'd like to welcome you to this commemoration of the 200th birthday of Julia Dent Grant. A special thank you to the National Park Service, the caretakers of this site, for all their support in making today possible, and to the Sons of Union veterans, Oliver Tilden Camp, for providing us a color guard. And thanks to all of our special guests who are participating in this tribute with their words, and in many cases with their wreaths. It's great to have so many of you join us after the snowstorm made us reschedule from this past Monday. Just so you know, due to the cold, this hour-long ceremony is in two parts. The first 30 minutes here, and then across the street at the Visitor Center for the remainder of the ceremony, including our keynote speaker, and then cake and refreshments. So thanks for patiently sticking with us today. Born in St. Louis on January 26, 1826, Julia Boggs Dent would go on to become one of the three longest-serving First Ladies prior to Eleanor Roosevelt. Even before becoming First Lady, she demonstrated her deep dedication to her husband Ulysses and to her country. During the Civil War, she traveled extensively to be with General Grant whenever possible, covering over 10,000 miles during the war, and on one occasion almost being captured by Confederate forces. After her husband was elected president, she became a particularly active and popular First Lady, serving in that role between 1869 and 1877. She had the White House refurbished extensively, including the family quarters, executive quarters, and a grand makeover of the East Room that made it one of the most celebrated interiors of the time. She met with cabinet members, senators, and Supreme Court justices, attended Senate hearings, and read the president's mail. She also showed remarkable growth. She had grown up in a slave-holding family and relied upon the labor of enslaved people prior to the war. But her husband's presidency broke new ground for voting and civil rights for former slaves, and Mrs. Grant directed that her public receptions at the White House be open to everyone, regardless of race or class. Mrs. Grant traveled outside of Washington, D.C. more than any First Lady before her, and following her husband's retirement from the presidency, she accompanied him on a storied 2.5-year trip around the world. She served as a virtual goodwill ambassador for the United States during those travels and enjoyed a warm reception in foreign countries, a reflection of the unprecedented standing of our country. Upon her husband's death in 1885, Mrs. Grant chose New York City and this spot where we are gathered for his burial. In 1898, she served as president of the Women's National War Relief Association, which mobilized donations of supplies to American troops fighting during the Spanish-American War, the first time a former First Lady assumed formal leadership for such a large public undertaking. Mrs. Grant was also the first First Lady to write her memoirs, published posthumously. She died at her home in Washington, D.C. on December 14, 1902. President Theodore Roosevelt and numerous other political and military leaders attended her funeral. Her remains rest here beside those of her husband in Grant's tomb, which is the largest mausoleum in the Western Hemisphere. The career of Ulysses S. Grant has been rising in appreciation in our national memory. The principal author of Union victory during the Civil War, the principal enforcer of emancipation, the president who secured new benchmarks in peace and equality. The Grants' storybook romance and rich marriage sustained both the general and the president, and it is hard to imagine his achievements without the support of his beloved Julia. So today, let us recognize this model citizen's service to her country during one of the most critical and formative periods in American history. Now, Mrs. Grant's birthday is being commemorated in proclamations and other special messages issued by states in which Mrs. Grant lived, the District of Columbia, and America's living First Ladies. We have included in your programs one of the proclamations from Mrs. Grant's birth state of Missouri, along with a First Lady message that arrived in time for today's observance. So let me first call up John Gregor, Junior Vice Commander of the Oliver Tilden Camp of the Sons of Union Veterans, to read a message from former First Lady Laura Bush.
Happy 200th birthday to First Lady Julia Grant. Mrs. Grant embraced her role as First Lady of the United States. She was a wonderful example to all other First Ladies. Julia Grant was a supportive wife, a loving mother, and a gracious hostess. It's been reported that she said her 8 years in the White House were the happiest time of her life. Mrs. Grant used her gift for hospitality and entertaining to welcome visitors to the People's House. As hosts of the very first state dinner, President and Mrs. Grant understood the importance of diplomacy. President Bush and I loved carrying on this special tradition. We thank the Ulysses S. Grant Association for preserving the history of our country's 18th First Lady. God bless the memory of First Lady Julia Grant, and may he continue to bless America.
Thank you so much, John. Mrs. Grant picked New York as the location of this monument, and we are honored that the governor of New York has prepared a citation for her 200th birthday. Here to present it on Governor Hochul's behalf is her Manhattan Regional Representative. So please join me in welcoming Jordan Feiner.
Oh, thank you. I like the light applause. Hello, everyone. Yeah, it's a birthday party. We're supposed to be clapping, right? I'm Jordan Feiner. I'm the Manhattan Regional Representative for Governor Hochul. Thank you all for coming out. Nice to do this on a day where there's not a blizzard, certainly. But as someone who likes the cold, you know, I'm enjoying myself right now, but not for too much. I don't want to spend too much time reading all the words on this. I know it's chilly and we all want to move to our next location. So I'd like to read just the last two paragraphs and then call up the congressman as well. So officially hand this over. But just very quickly, whereas Ulysses was elected president of the United States in 1868 and served 2 subsequent terms, during which Julia became one of the 3 longest-serving First Ladies prior to Eleanor Roosevelt. She frequently met with major government officials, including senators and Supreme Court justices, and attended at Senate hearings as President Grant's administration implemented new civil rights and voting measures for former slaves. Julia directed that her public receptions at the White House would be open to people of all races. And whereas, after her husband's presidency ended, Julia accompanied him on a 2.5-year international trip, must be nice, serving as an ambassador of goodwill for the United States in foreign countries. After moving with her family to New York City in 1881, she became president of the Women's National War Relief Association, leading the organization in supply mobilization efforts during the Spanish-American War. She also wrote the personal memoirs of Julia Dent Grant, Mrs. Ulysses S. Grant, which was published posthumously. And whereas Julia died in Washington, D.C. on December 14, 1902, and was buried in the General Grant National Memorial, the largest mausoleum in North America, alongside her husband, now, therefore, I, Kathy Hochul, Governor of the State of New York, hereby confer this special citation in recognition of the 200th anniversary of the birth of First Lady Julia Dent Grant, to preserve her legacy and advance the principles of national service that she and President Grant lived by.
Thank you, Jordan. Now, our next speaker, who was just up here, really needs no introduction to those of you who are in our community. We're really honored to have him. You know, 4 years ago, Ulysses S. Grant marked his 200th birthday. And our next speaker was one of the members of Congress who was a principal introducer, helped introduce legislation to posthumously promote Ulysses S. Grant to General of the Armies of the United States. And that measure actually did wind up going through before 2022 was concluded. So we're really honored to have with us, representing New York's 13th Congressional District, Congressman Adriano Espaillat.
Good morning, everybody. The snowstorm did work for me because on that Monday I would have been in Washington, but today I could be here with you. So it's a pleasure to be here today in this special moment as we celebrate Julia Dent Grant in this bicentennial celebration. Abraham Lincoln said, during obviously a very tumultuous time in America, that in this age and this country, public sentiment is everything. Without it, nothing can fail. Against it, nothing can succeed. So one can imagine the efforts of Ulysses S. Grant, his military genius and his ability to keep the country together during that troubled time where the country found itself divided, looking for guidance and reconciliation. So the fact that we have this monument here, this mausoleum here, it's really a great opportunity to not only honor his legacy and Julia's legacy, but to uplift what our nation stands for during a crossroad in our nation where we all seek to have public sentiment be a guiding light for all Americans. And so I hope my office will work to put together a team made up of community folks and members that are invested in keeping this monument in good condition so that we could honor the bicentennial celebration appropriately and that we can upkeep this treasure that is right here in northern Manhattan. Now, the district that I represent is not only the smallest geographic district in the country, you could walk it on a warm, sunny day, but it also has Harlem in it. And this monument is connected via history and the commercial arteries to Harlem. It has the Hamilton Grange in it, and it has Hamilton Heights and Washington Heights, Inwood and the Northwest Bronx, historic neighborhoods in our country that I think make it one of the most iconic districts in the nation. And so we have a great opportunity to come together and highlight places like Grant's Tomb to the rest of the nation. And today is one of those days on a cold Sunday morning. Thank you for inviting me. And I hope that I could work with you in ensuring that this treasure remains one for all Americans. Thank you, and keep the faith.
Thank you so much, Congressman. We really appreciate your commitment to preserving this monument. Look forward to working with you on that. Now, Ulysses S. Grant met Julia Boggs Dent after he graduated from West Point. But before they married, Ulysses was called into action during the Mexican War. Separation for the happy couple was a challenge, but Julia was a source of comfort, cheerfulness, and grace, no matter what the circumstance. Now to perform a popular piece from the Mexican War years, Green Grow the Lilacs, it is my pleasure to present to you Linda Russell.
After graduating from West Point, Grant was assigned to the Jefferson Barracks near St. Louis. St. Louis is right near the beautiful farm in Missouri where Julia lived, and her brother had been Grant's West Point classmate and roommate. So there he is in Jefferson Barracks, so he brings him home one weekend, and then Grant keeps coming. And they were inseparable, going on walks and horseback rides, but let's hear it from Julia. The lieutenant rode a bonny little brown steed with flowing wavy mane and tail. My horse was a beauty, a chestnut brown, glossy as satin. Such rides. Well, I cannot tell of those 2 winged months. He was always by my side, walking or riding. Colonel Dent didn't think a soldier was the right material for a husband for her. So they were secretly engaged. And then he went to war. And as Frank said, this is the song about lovers parted from that Mexican war. Green grow the lilacs so sparkling with dew. I'm lonely, my darling, since parting from you. By the next meeting I hope to prove true. Change the green lilacs for the red, white, and blue. Once I had a sweetheart, now I have none. He's gone, he's left me to weep and mourn. He's gone and he's left me, contented I'll be. He must love another one better than me. I passed by his doorway both early and late. The look that he gave me, it made my heart ache. The look that he gave me was frightful to see. He must love another one better than me. Upon the mountain where the green lilacs grow, down in the valley where the still waters flow, I met my true love and he proved to be true. He changed the green lilacs for the red, white, and blue. Green grow the lilacs so sparkling with dew. Lonely, my darling, since parting from you. By the next meeting I hope to prove true. Change the green lilacs for the red, white, and blue. Bravo.
Well, thank you, Linda, for that wonderful performance. We've now reached the part of our program where wreaths and flowers honoring Julia Dent Grant will be presented here at her final resting place by several organizations and individuals paying tribute to a great First Lady. When I call your organization's name, please bring your wreath to the edge of the stairway to the crypt. As we do this, Linda Russell will perform another period piece, a favorite of Mrs. Grant, called Lorena. The first wreath is from the Grant family and will be placed by Ulysses Grant Dietz.
The years creep slowly by, Lorena. The snow is on the grass again. The sun's low down the sky. Lorena. The frost gleams with the flowers at me. But the sun beats on us warmly now. As when the summer days were nigh. Oh, the sun can never dip so low. Adown affection's cloudless sky. We love each other then, Lorena, more than we ever dared to tell. And what might have been, Lorena, had but our loving prospered well.
Next, we have flowers being placed by Eileen Sleckman on behalf of the Daughters of Union Veterans of the Civil War, Katie Brownell, tent number 36.
But just past those years ago, I'll not call up their shadowy form. I'll say to them, lost years, sleep on, sleep on, nor heed life's pelting storm. 100 months have gone, Lorena, since last I held your hand in mine, and I felt your pulse beat fast.
Our next wreath by the Sons of Union Veterans of the Civil War, Oliver Tilden, camp number 26, will be placed by George Weinman.
But mine beat faster far than thine. 100 months 'twas flowery May, when up the hilly slope we climbed to watch the dying of the day and hear the lonesome church bells chime. It matters little now, Lorena. The past is the eternal past. Our hearts will soon lie low.
Next, we will have two wreaths placed by members of the Society of Presidential Descendants. The first wreath will be placed by Massey McKinley on behalf of the McKinley presidential family.
Life's tide is ebbing out so fast. There is a future, thank God, of life. This is so small apart. Tears dust to dust beneath the soil. But there, up there, just heart to heart, just dust to dust beneath the sun. But there, up there, 'tis heart to heart.
Next wreath will be placed by Michelle Strauss, representing the Harding presidential family. And finally, a wreath and also white roses from the Grant Monument Association will be placed by Kathy Dito and Lucia McCreary.
It matters little now, Lorena. The past is the eternal past. Our hearts will soon lie low, Lorena. But there, up there, 'tis heart to heart.
Thank you so much. So we've now concluded the first half of our ceremony, the part taking place inside the mausoleum. We will proceed now to the second half of the ceremony across the street at the Visitor Center. But first, if you'll please stand, Commander George Weinman and the color guard will now retire the colors.
Attention. Right face. Forward. On.
Welcome back. We're going to resume here for those of you who weren't across the street just now, our program marking Julia Dent Grant's 200th birthday. We have remarks from several special guests. Throughout her life, Julia Grant devoted a great deal of time to her family, which in her later years came to include great-grandchildren. Our next speaker is one of her great-great-grandchildren, someone who has served very capably over the years as a spokesman for his family on the issue of this monument's preservation, and someone who regularly speaks on the birthday of his legendary great-great-grandfather, President Grant. So now to offer some reflections on his great-great-grandmother, I'm pleased to welcome Ulysses Grant Dietz.
Tight in here, okay. Well, it feels so different in here than it did in the tomb. In good ways and bad ways, it's a little more prosaic space, but I'm really honored. I'm honored to be here. I'm just laughing because basically everybody who got up and spoke already said everything I was going to say, so I don't know what to say. I don't have any script except one little thing I want to read at the end. But I really wanted to just sort of speak from the heart and speak sort of personally about what Julia Grant means to me. And because I was raised as Ulysses, I was raised as Grant really, because when I grew up in the 1950s, U.S. Grant's reputation was as low as it has ever been. So my grandfather, U.S. Grant III, who is that little boy, he was flattered. I was the last child born in my generation, and my mother thought she'd tag me with the name, and my grandfather said, well, that's very nice, Julia. Well, my mother's name was Julia. And I said, but call him that. So I grew up being called Grant. But so the name Julia has always meant a lot to me. And my mother and her two sisters, the little boy grew up to be a general, went to West Point, and he had 3 girls. And the last one was my mother, born in 1916. And see, this is the way I always, if I don't have a script, I'm just wandering around here and I realize I'm telling stories. But all the telegrams in her scrapbook that my grandmother put together are all, oh, so glad the baby is born. You must be so crushed that it's another girl. And I said to my mother, I said, was grandfather like resentful that he didn't have a little Ulysses? And my mother said, I think he was relieved that he had 3 daughters to support. He sent them. His wife didn't get to go to college. His sister didn't get to go to college because women often didn't. But he made sure all of his daughters went to college. And so I think he loved having this trio of smart young women. He loved having a smart wife. This is Ulysses III. So now I'm going to jump back to the grandfather, because what I realized that I know Julia Grant better than I knew my own grandfather, because he only wrote one book and it was about his grandfather. So Ulysses S. Grant III wrote the first new biography of U.S. Grant, and it was like all biographies by men, of men, it's all about war and politics. But when he died, the manuscript of Julia's memoirs came to my mother and her sisters. And they ended up publishing it. There is a paperback copy floating around that I've signed today. That John Y. Simon and the U.S. Grant Association made sure they got that published. But that came from my mother and her sisters because it was important to them to see this thing that they didn't even know existed got published. And Julia was my portal into history. I was a museum curator, cultural historian, for 37 years. That was my whole career. But I was not interested in history, I was interested in things. And if you read histories by men, they're all about war and politics. Histories, memoirs by women are all about home and family, sometimes decorating. And I have gone through Julia's memoirs and picked out every reference to a thing that she's ever mentioned. And it's a whole different way of looking at history, and it drew me in to history and made me realize I needed to learn about my own family's history. So I read that book 50 years ago when I was 20 years old in college, and I've read it 3 times, and I keep it on my Kindle, which is in my coat, so that I can refer to it because it's always useful. Someone says, did Julia mention this city? And I'm thinking, why do you think I know that? But I can go to my Kindle and look it up. But really, the bottom line here is I actually love Julia because I know her. Not just reading her memoirs, but reading about her, reading Ishmael Ross's book, and thinking about the life she led. And, you know, the people who spoke already, Frank included, sort of covered all the details. But what I particularly liked, what I loved looking at Julia, and I think back in 1997 when we spoke at the rededication of Grant's tomb, they gave me 20 minutes and it was outside in a howling wind, but it was warm anyway. But the thing that strikes me most about Julia and her life with Ulysses, they were married almost 37 years, is that it was a love story. And it was a love story on a par with Victoria and Albert. You know who they are? I don't know, some young people might not know who Victoria and Albert were. But Albert died quicker than U.S. Grant did, so Julia and Ulysses had 37 years. And it's one of those things that it was almost love at first sight, and it lasted, and it was him in love with her first, and he had to talk her into it. But then there's that whole complicated thing about Julia, that she really represents the American woman across the entire 19th century, from the 1820s to 1902. She represents all of the changes, and together as a couple, but this is about her. All of the changes that happened to American women across the 19th century. And it's complicated, and again, nobody talked about it when I was growing up, that Julia was raised on a plantation with enslaved workers. And which nobody mentioned, and I read this in a memoir of one of her children, Jessie, the youngest, said that all of her children were raised by her father's slaves. Ulysses was too poor to have slaves, which is one of the reasons Fred didn't like him. And so he loaned Julia. I mean, this all gets very, in modern day our comfort zone is very different. In the 19th century, Ulysses was probably a little uncomfortable, but he needed help. His wife needed help, and she got to have servants that she wouldn't have had otherwise because he was a badly paid army officer who kept traveling around. But the other thing about that I love is that her family, the slaveholding family in Missouri, are the ones who taught Ulysses what gentle domestic love was. And the folks at the Grant Historic Site, anybody's car, at Whitehaven in St. Louis, where Julia grew up, the staff there has done a lot of research into the enslaved people there. But the other thing they've done a research into is why did Ulysses didn't meet Julia on his first visit there? They went. He came with his roommate Fred Dent, and on some later trip is when they ran into each other, and it was like he was smitten right away. But her family, however contentious his relationship with Fred Dent was, they taught him what a loving family was. And it's not that Jesse and Hannah Grant didn't love their son; they just didn't show it because they were these like Calvinist Methodists who never showed emotion, and Jesse just pushed him and pushed him and pushed him. So, he had father issues, and Fred sort of complemented that. But the other thing is that those kids, somehow Ulysses and Julia raised children, 4 children, all of whom believed that they were the best loved child. And they all grew up believing that they were the favorite child until as adults they compared notes and realized they all felt that way. And I think that's an extraordinary thing in the 19th century to not only have a couple that was so close and fond of each other, but to raise their children so that they all felt that way. Because I've read a lot about the 19th century and that doesn't happen all the time. And then Julia was not Eleanor Roosevelt. I don't even know if she was Florence Harding because I don't know enough about Florence Harding. But Julia was not, she loved society, she loved being a hostess, she loved all of the perks that came as her husband got more and more powerful. But really, what she really wanted to do was what women were taught. Women who were born in the 1820s were taught that what you were supposed to want in your life was to get married, to be a mother, to be a wife, and to be a homemaker. These are all areas that related to my career as a museum curator. And that's what she did. She never wanted to be powerful. She was a little bit interested in women's suffrage. She was very interested in the Methodist Church. But really, her goal in life was to be a wife, a mother, and a homemaker. And her ultimate success, she was a homemaker at Hardscrabble, which she hated. One of the few things she did not like about her husband was that he built that house. And they didn't live there long. And she was a homemaker in Galena. She was a homemaker in Washington after the war, but before the presidency. And then she was a homemaker in the White House. And I'll tell you, she walked into the White House thinking, oh, this is sort of like Whitehaven. Whitehaven could have fit in the East Room with no problem. But she took to the White House like it was her house. And she was the first lady to really embrace the domesticity of it. And I've written a book on the White House, and I got lured into it because I was interested in what Julia did. And I must admit, like all first ladies, Julia she revered the history of the house and didn't have any patience with what the first ladies before her had done. So she did her own thing. But that's sort of part of it. And that's what I really love about her is that that was her role. Being first lady was her highest achievement. Watching her husband become a great man when she believed he could was a triumph for her. And of course, their love for each other. If whoever owns the rights to it, Spielberg and Matt Damon or something like that, that's not quite right. DiCaprio? If they ever make the second movie out of the rights of Ron Chernow's book, and I really hope they do, I want it to be a love story about Ulysses and Julia. Because they're together in that tomb because they insisted on it. And side by side, Yuli and Julie forever. I call them Yuli and Julie. Some of my friends call me Yuli. So I want to end these little remarks with just a note I actually sat and wrote down. I'll tell you, cursive is really hard if you're used to a computer. But I want to read it and then have just a comment at the end. Her last words in her memoirs are, "For nearly 37 years, I, his wife," as if she was anything else, I don't know, "rested and was warmed in the sunlight of his loyal love and great fame. And now, even though this beautiful life has gone out, It is as when some far-off planet disappears from the heavens. The light of his glorious fame still reaches out to me, falls upon me, and warms me. And that's how she ends her memoir. But I think it's the light of his glorious fame. I thought, oh, so the love? What about the love, Julia? But I realized the glorious fame, she's not saying, oh, my husband was famous. She was saying, I helped him do that. Job well done. His triumph was my triumph because I was always by his side. And that's why I love her. Thank you.
Thank you, Ulysses. Fantastic, as always. I would like to call up next Eileen Sleckman, past New York Department President of the Daughters of Union Veterans of the Civil War.
It's not the easiest thing. Sorry. I can, thank you. I will be very brief though. So yes, Eileen Slackman, and I'm with the Daughters of Union Veterans of the Civil War. So my great-grandfather fought with the 4th U.S. Infantry, which I think went on to become one of Grant's favorite regiments. Yeah. He, of course, was taken out before then, but I always think that maybe they would have come into contact with one another. But it's Julia that, one thing I love about my organization is that we honor these women that might have been forgotten. Now, Julia wouldn't have been forgotten by history, but many of them would have been. Women who helped in the Civil War effort, and, you know, if their stories weren't told, we wouldn't know about them. And we name our tents after some of these women, and Julia, of course, has been named many times. But one thing I've always admired about what I've heard of the Grants is their partnership. It seems as if their marriage was it went beyond a marriage, it went beyond love. It was really a partnership of equals. That's what comes across when I've read his memoirs. I haven't read hers, I'll have to do that. That it really was, I bet it started with a love of horses or something, you know, mutual interests, but it seemed like it was just a wonderful, loving partnership and a real example for the rest of the country. I'm sure they had their differences, you know, I'm sure they didn't agree on many, many things, but I often think, why can't we all have something that we have in common. We all love our children, we all have to sit down and eat dinner, and why we all can't get along and build something as beautiful as they did. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Eileen. Next, I'd like to call up George Weinman, the commander of the Oliver Tilden Camp of the Sons of Union Veterans of the Civil War and captain of Company I, 83rd New York Volunteer Infantry in the Sons of the Veterans Reserve. George.
Get them out to work again after, out there in the cold. Okay, good afternoon. My name is George Wyman. I am the commander of Oliver Tilden Camp number 26, past Department Commander, Sons of Union Veterans of the Civil War. I would like to thank Brother Frank Scatoro, President of the Grant Monument Association, for inviting Tilden Camp to participate in the 200th birthday celebration of First Lady Julia Grant, wife of General and President Ulysses S. Grant. Also, thank you all for everybody that's here today for enduring this cold temperature. Demonstration, everyone's dedication to honor First Lady Julia Grant on her birthday. The cold weather could not hold us back. Julia Grant demonstrated her dedication to love her beloved husband, Ulysses S. Grant, throughout the marriage, including during the Civil War, his presidency, their travels, and to his death. She was always there for him. During the Civil War, many of the soldiers would see her in camp with General Grant. She often provided comfort to the wounded soldiers that were hospitalized, many times passing messages and requests to and from the general. When Grant won the presidency in 1869 and 1877, she was there for him. She gave him support and was very active First Lady. which including meeting many dignitaries, such as elected officials in the government. Because of our White House activities, she became very popular with the American people. After Grant's presidency, they traveled on a nearly 3-year world tour, covering roughly 19 countries in Europe, Asia, and Africa. They were always together, and she always was dedicated to him and the United States. Ulysses S. Grant died on July 23rd, 1885. Julia Grant was by his side during his prolonged battle with throat cancer. During this time, he completed his personal memoirs just days before his death, with the assistance of his friend Mark Twain, assuring his family's financial security. Ulysses S. Grant was officially moved into his final resting place, Grant's tomb, on April 27, 1897. Julia Grant joined her beloved husband in Grant's tomb in 1902. God bless First Lady Julia Grant, and happy 200th birthday. I salute you.
Thanks so much, Brother George. The National Park Service has administered the tomb of Ulysses and Julia Grant for nearly 67 years. And we are grateful to the rangers on staff for all that they do for the site, including making programs like this one possible. So I'd like to recognize Interpretive Park Ranger Miranda Allen for her hard work and invite her to offer you a welcome from the Park Service.
Thank you. Hello. My name is Ranger Miranda Allen, and on behalf of the National Park Service, I'd like to welcome you to General Grant National Memorial. Now, we have a lot of familiar faces in here because of Grant's annual birthday celebration, and as of recent, his death commemoration as well. But today, we commemorate Julia's 200th birthday. All throughout Grant's life, Julia was nothing but supportive. Whether it was on the battlefield during the Civil War, in the White House, or in upstate New York as he finished his memoirs, Julia was right by his side. Having grown up on a plantation, she had a different perspective of slavery, and ultimately had to decide between supporting her abolitionist husband or her slave-owning father. It was always a sure decision. She always chose Grant. First Lady wasn't officially the title for the president's wife during his presidency, but Julia was born for that role. As hostess of the White House, she was very comfortable engaging with elected officials and dignitaries who paid visits to the White House and organized state dinners, balls, or other occasions that called for a party. So here we are, having a party for her. It's no surprise that Grant would have wanted her by his side for eternity. He was absolutely head over heels for her. And to him, she was the most beautiful woman in his eyes. And she helped guarantee that his one dying wish was granted. Gotta make that joke every once in a while. That they would be together forever for eternity. They could not have found a more perfect person to spend forever with than with each other. Thank you, and happy belated birthday to Julia.
Thank you, Miranda. Next, you've heard from a member of the Grant family, and I'd like to recognize additional presidential descendants, direct and collateral, who are joining us today. President William McKinley spoke at the dedication of Grant's tomb in 1897 on what would have been President Grant's 75th birthday. One former president was there that day, joining President McKinley to review the grand parade of about 55,000 marchers, Grover Cleveland. Today we have a descendant representing both the McKinley and Cleveland family. Please welcome the co-founder, vice president, and chief of staff of the Society of Presidential Descendants and co-chair of the National First Ladies' Day Commission, Massey McKinley.
Thank you, Frank. There's not a place that I would rather be than here today, because Ulysses is a dear friend. He was one of the founders with us for the Society of Presidential Descendants, and I think the world of him. As Frank said, William actually was at the dedication, spoke at the dedication in 1897, and also Grover Cleveland was present at that particular event as well. So on behalf of the Society of Presidential Descendants and the National First Ladies Day Commission, we wish Julia Grant a happy 200th birthday, and God bless Ulysses and Julia Grant, and God bless America.
Thank you, Matt. President Grant was the first of 7 presidents born in Ohio, and President Warren Harding was the 7th president on that list. Now, President Harding celebrated U.S. Grant's 100th birthday in 1922 in an address delivered at Grant's birthplace in Point Pleasant, Ohio. So it's fitting that we have with us, also from the Society of Presidential Descendants, a member of President Harding's family. Please welcome the chairman of the Strauss Family Office, Michelle Strauss.
Thank you, Frank. It's a pleasure to meet you, and I'm delighted to be here today. I'd like to offer a little perspective from the female side, perhaps of First Ladies. My own grandmother took me out on nature walks. She grew up in rural Washington State, often referred to herself as a hillbilly. And she taught me about nature. We would go for walks. She taught me how to use what she called a pea shooter, which many of us probably know as a slingshot, and recognize tracks from animals and what plants you could eat, how to make a shelter and survive. But I like to think that Julia also did things like this with her own children and grandchildren, and spent time also educating them about things that a mother and a grandmother would. And I think there's a lot of value in that, and I don't think that just being recognized as a wife of a president is nearly enough to round out who she really was. And when I think of her and other first ladies, I think of them as a sentinel who stands perhaps just a little bit behind or to the side of someone who is so multifunctional as a president. And I also think of first ladies as a symbol of hope for our country and their hope for the country. And so, of course, I'm delighted to be here, and I thank you so much.
Thank you, Michelle. We are honored to have as our keynote speaker a historian who may be our country's top expert on the life of Julia Dent Grant. For years, as the St. Louis estate of Julia's youth, Whitehaven was being developed by the National Park Service as the Ulysses S. Grant National Historic Site. She served as the site's historian and education director. She went on to work at the Dwight D. Eisenhower Presidential Library and the Gateway Arch National Park, but her work on the Grant legacy continues as she is writing a biography of Mrs. Grant. So please welcome Pan Sanfilippo.
Good afternoon, everyone. First, I'd like to thank you, Frank, and the Grant Monument Association for inviting me to talk with you today to celebrate with all of you the 200th anniversary of Julia Dent Grant's birth. As I thought about what I wanted to share with you, I considered several different topics. Julia's wife and mother, which many have shared already. Julia's diplomat. Julia's first lady, to name a few. And then last week, I attended the funeral of a woman from my church, Laura, who I knew through our book club. At the funeral, her daughter shared that a few years ago, she and her 2 brothers gave their mother a subscription to Storyworth. For those who aren't familiar with it, Storyworth sends the family member a question each week for a year to spark memories of their lives, and then those stories are compiled into a book of memories. Laura's family shared some of those stories at the memorial service, and through them, I learned so much about Laura that I never would have imagined. I'm sure the family will treasure those stories forever, easing the pain of their loss and keeping her always in their memory. So why do I mention this? Some of you may see where I'm headed, because I think Julia Dent Grant's memoirs are a precursor to Storyworth. They're a collection of memories of her life, and her son Frederick may have prompted her with questions such as, what was your earliest memory? When did you first meet Ulysses? Tell us about your family, your parents, your relationship with Ulysses' parents, and your own children. What did you do during the war? What was life like in the White House? Did you ever advise your husband about military or political matters? What was it like to travel around the world? And finally, when did you first learn of Ulysses' illness, and how did you survive after his death? These questions and more Julia answers in her memoirs. It's as if she is a friend and neighbor, not a general's wife or former First Lady of the United States, sitting in your living room, sharing appetizers and perhaps a glass of wine. At least that's how I've imagined it in my mind. I certainly am not alone in this assessment, and critics and historians alike have credited Julia's memoirs as revealing her charm, vivacity, and kindness. They reflect her unassuming nature and her acceptance of those from other places, customs, and beliefs. And I believe they represent a life well lived, one to honor and model today. I've sat curled up in a chair reading her memoirs, smiling at her foolishness as she recalled nearly drowning in Gravois Creek on her father's estate because the minister at church had instilled in her child's mind that faith could literally keep her from sinking. I've been touched as she recalled Ulysses' shyness in courtship and her own ignorance of the extent of her own feelings for him until he was to depart for Louisiana before the war with Mexico. And I read with dismay through my 21st century lens as she relayed stories of how the enslaved at Whitehaven were treated well and were happy, and how they served as her dusky train while exploring the fields and woods. Today, Ulysses S. Grant National Historic Site is often referred to as Colonel Dent's Whitehaven Plantation in those pre-Civil War years. But to Julia, it was simply home, and all those who lived there were family. Her reminiscences of the Civil War years provide a personal backdrop to the military and political battles that ensued. And for Julia, like many other women, it was home and family that were most important to her. She tells us that she kept Ulysses in touch with what was going on at home during the war. She asked for his guidance in family and property matters, and usually heeded his advice as she took over responsibilities traditionally the purview of husbands. And, like all wives on the home front, she looked forward to the day when Ulysses would finally return. However, she also faced challenges that were exclusive to her own family, including her defense against public criticisms of her husband, protecting her children from public scrutiny, and defending her loyalty against those who claimed her slaveholding ties made her a Southerner. And as such, the memoirs are a testament to her resilience and her willingness to change with the times and circumstances. Her recollections of the White House years again provide a personal backdrop to the political stage of the executive branch of the government. In reading them, one feels that the curtain is being drawn back to show that the Grant family really was not very different than most other families. Of course, through the memoirs, we travel vicariously around the world with Ulysses and Julia Grant. It is her reminiscences of people, especially women, in Egypt, India, and Asia that reveal much about Julia's nature. In Egypt, she was disappointed that tradition did not allow the princess to attend the banquet in Grant's honor and let it be known that women would not consent to such an unjust custom in the United States. In India, she met another princess who was not allowed to attend a government reception but could only view it from the balcony. So what did Julia do? She joined the princess on the balcony, comparing her to, as she said, a delicate flower upon which the sun has never shone. She found the markets at Rangoon interesting because, again, as she put it, the women were simply beautiful. And in China and Japan, she was careful to honor their customs by eating only the delicacies typical of those cultures. Had Julia's memoirs been published shortly after they were written, they would have complemented John Russell Young's Around the World with General Grant. Whereas Young highlighted Grant's status as an unofficial diplomat and ambassador, Julia's memoirs would have brought these exotic places, and especially the people who lived there, back to Americans who might never have the opportunity to travel. And she does so by linking them to stories she had read in the Bible or poetry and novels. We only know Julia Grant because she chose to write her memoirs. Without them, she would be relegated to a very one-dimensional character in the life of Ulysses S. Grant. Her character shines through as she recalls good times and bad, and her love for her husband and pride in her family are unquestionable. I wish Julia's contemporaries would have had the pleasure of reading her memoirs, but perhaps, as one publisher suggested, there was too much honesty in the work. They were ahead of her time. In today's tell-all world, they would be considered tame. But the format she used is still effective. Storyworth and similar applications now help people record their memories for their children and grandchildren. I am so thankful that the Grant family kept Julia's memoirs and then agreed to share them with the world when John Y. Simon asked to edit and publish them in 1975. As a result, as we celebrate Julia Dent Grant's birth 200 years ago, we celebrate a life well lived and are thankful that we get to know her through the memoirs. Thank you.
Thank you, Pam. That was wonderful. We're so looking forward to the biography, whenever it comes out. Richard. Well, our program is now concluded. I want to thank all of you for being part of this special observance. For those of you who are staying with us, in a short while, at around 2:45, I will be giving a presentation here on the life of Julia Dent Grant. But for the moment, now please enjoy some birthday cake and refreshments. Thanks very much.